Hey and welcome everyone. Today on Skylines Summer Sessions, myself and Richard are joined by Sarah Lean, who is a cloud advocate at Microsoft. Very warm welcome, Sarah. Great to have you on today's show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honour to be here.
Cool. Today you're going to be talking about data center migrations and Azure Migrate. So to kick things off, Sarah, tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role at Microsoft.
Okay, so I am firmly in that IT pro or IT infrastructure camp. That's what I've been doing for about 14 years in my IT career. And before I joined Microsoft, that was very much hands-on in terms of racking and stacking all that infrastructure, fighting with server racks in data centers and looking after all of that. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I've really transitioned from being that on-prem engineer to a cloud engineer, or a hybrid engineer, depending on how you want to look at it, because I span both technologies or both platforms now. The role at Microsoft as a cloud advocate is a very varied role and one I am really excited about doing. So part of it is about speaking to our community, either by creating blog posts or documentation or doing things like this and communicating and getting feedback. And because the cloud advocate team at Microsoft actually sits within the Azure engineering space and organisation, we have close links with the people who actually make the products. So we love to hear feedback, both positive and negative, about our products, and we can then pass that back into the engineering team and hopefully make things better, or give the teams a pat on the back for doing the right things with the products as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Nice, cool.
Nice. So I hear you're talking to us about Azure Migrate. What can Azure Migrate actually do?
So Azure Migrate is this, well, I think, really cool product that helps organizations understand their environment. So it gives you that overall look at how your environment is. So it gives you what servers are in it, what dependencies all those servers have, and then it actually gives you some information around how you can move that into Azure. So it gives you the cost and it flags up any issues you might have about hosting some of those workloads or servers in the cloud. And it not only does the assessment piece, it also actually can do the migration piece as well. So it can actually do that lift and shift or the move from on-prem into Azure.
Nice. I don't know actually anything about Azure Migrate, so I'm really looking forward to this. So I've got a question. Why is doing a full discovery of your environment before you start the migration key to the success of the project, would you say?
So if we're all honest, we've all worked in IT departments that have big holes in the documentation, right? There's always some gotcha that we come across where we didn't know it or it wasn't documented. And that's why a full discovery really is important. When you're starting to look at migrating your workloads, your data center up into the cloud, you need to understand what's there and how it all interconnects. I think when I've been working with customers to do data center migrations, they always uncover something in their discovery that they didn't know about, and whether that be something like someone's accidentally put in something on a SQL Server database that was temporary and has suddenly become a production workload, and they didn't have any documentation, they didn't realize it was on that server. The server could be called dev, and it's a development environment and it's a production environment. So there's things like that. And you also find those wee servers that are hiding in the corner that you've forgotten about, or someone's installed on the sneaky sly. And that's really why that discovery is important, because you uncover those things that you forgot about or didn't know about, and you can start to plan about it because you've got that full picture, you've got that full understanding of what your environment currently looks like, and then you can start to move it, because the last thing you want to do is get halfway through the project and realize that there is some interconnectivity between some SQL Server database and your main production web app, and then you haven't planned for that and you suddenly get hauled over the coals by your CEO and things go belly up and you've got customers shouting at you and services down, etc. So
nice.
So I hear you've got a demo and some slides for us.
Yep, so I've got a slide deck that kind of talks about some of the process around data center migration, because it's not all just about Azure Migrate, and then I've got a wee bit of a demo for Azure Migrate as well. So I've been talking to customers quite a bit about data center migrations, and everybody moves for different reasons, right? Some people are wanting to move because their data center contracts are expiring and they need to either renew that or get something else. Or potentially they're just running out of physical space within that data center. Now, regardless of why these customers are moving, there's really 4 key stages that I always tell them that they kind of have to concentrate on, and I think are really important in that data center migration phase. So the first stage is that discovery phase, and that is what we were talking about, doing that full understanding of what's happening within your environment, what's there, and figuring out how you can move that and what makes sense to be moved into Azure as well. Now, the discovery phase isn't just about looking at what's in your environment, it's also identifying the staffing levels, what staff are trained in Azure, what staff need trained in Azure, and understanding all of that piece, because I've seen data center migrations fail as well because people bring in external companies to do the migration, don't bother training up their in-house persons, and then once that external partner leaves, the people are left to look after an environment that they don't have any knowledge of and don't have any experience of, and it becomes a bit of a guddle for them, to be honest. So you really need to have that look at what's happening within your environment, not only from a technology point of view, but from a people and processes point of view as well. And the discovery phase should be looking at understanding cost as well, because a lot of customers are looking to try and save some money or understand their cost a bit better. So part of your discovery phase should be really understanding your current data center costs as well, understanding how much things like your electricity for your data center costs, all the way down to your server licensing. And then that way you can actually compare it when you look at the cloud costs as well and have a proper picture of that. Now, once you've done all that discovery, the next stage really is around the migration, and that's about trying to understand what workloads you're going to move, how you're going to move them, and what they'll look like within that cloud environment. Now, there's no right or wrong way of moving your workloads into Azure or into any cloud provider. I know there's a lot of talk around the 5 Rs, around rehosting, refactoring, rebuild, etc. And each of those probably will play a part in your strategy. Unfortunately, I've seen some customers pick one of those 5 Rs and try and shoehorn everything into that strategy. And it unfortunately doesn't work because, like I said, some workloads can be just rebuilt and put into Azure, and others can be refactored. They can be looking at something like a PaaS or a SaaS service to replace that server workload that you currently have on-prem. Now, you should also be thinking at the migration stage around what you're going to be doing for long-term monitoring, backup, disaster recovery, etc., and when you can implement that. And these are things that you start to think about as you move these workloads and as you start to design what they look like, whether they're going to be an IaaS service or a PaaS service, etc. And you start to build out that strategy piece for everything. Now, your third stage is your optimized stage. Now, arguably, this is probably a stage that should run throughout your entire data center migration project, but ultimately it'll become a business as usual activity. And that's around just making the cloud offering that you've put in place better, both from a performance point of view, security point of view, and a cost saving point of view. I've seen a lot of people over-optimize or over-index on the cost savings and trying to optimize their workloads. They get caught up in trying to save their organization money. They start to drive that budget far too low, and they become stuck in this guddle again where they're running workloads that are not right or not right sized for what the operation is trying to do. So when you're thinking about trying to drive those costs down or trying to, level them out and understand them, what I tell customers is to only ever look at that maybe every 2 months or every 3 months or maybe even 6 months. And that way you've got a lot of performance data, you've collected a lot of data, and you can actually start to optimize properly based on what's been happening over those couple of months within your environment. And you're not getting stuck up on being that cost-driven unit that you are trying to be. Now, the fourth stage, and again, another stage that probably should be running throughout your entire migration project, is secure and manage. And this is something, again, that will become a business as usual activity. And this is really all about knowing where your responsibility is for managing your workloads and securing them within the cloud environment, because it's changed from when it was hosted on-prem. On-prem, you probably looked after things like the physical data center security. I've even been looking after data centers where I had to make sure I ordered enough toilet paper for the data center. In reality, when you move to the cloud, that's very much different. That Microsoft takes care of all that in terms of the Azure cloud offering. So you need to figure out things about securing your data and making sure that the data and the right people have access to it. So knowing your responsibility and knowing your cloud provider's responsibility is really key here as well. And also starting to think about, right, now I'm in the cloud, what features and what functionality can I actually leverage? What cool technology do they offer that I can leverage and make my workloads even more secure, and start to automate or manage these workloads as well in a much more efficient way? So that's the kind of 4 key stages, and I probably could talk about each of those stages for at least an hour, and I think I have done if people let me talk about it, but that's just an overview of what those 4 stages are. In terms of where Azure Migrate can actually start to help you, let's have a look at that. So Azure Migrate has been around for a while. When we actually look at it, it was launched at Ignite in September 2017. So it has been around for a long time. And over that time period, it has grown in stature. When it was first released, it was just an assessment tool, and it only could look after actually assessing your VMware environments. But like I said, as it's grown in functionality, and we've put in customer feedback. So our customers have fed back what they want from an assessment and a migration tool, and we've put that in. And it's really become this hub for your data center migrations. We have the ability to look at all your key migration strategies or scenarios. So it's not just your servers. We can look at your data, so that raw data that you're storing, your SQL databases, your web apps, your VDI infrastructure. All of those key migration scenarios are now covered within Azure Migrate. And like I said at the top of the session, we have the ability to discover, assess, and actually migrate those workloads from on-prem into the cloud as well. But it's not just our own tooling that we have built into Azure Migrate. We're actually looking at integrating some third-party or ISV tooling as well. So you can mix and match. You can use a bit of our tooling, and you can use a bit of third-party tooling, especially if you've already got a relationship with some of those third-party companies, which we know our customers do have. And it really becomes that centralized management point, right? It becomes that one-stop shop. You don't have to have multiple browsers open. You don't have to have multiple things bookmarked so that you go to it. You can just go into the Azure portal and the Azure Migrate blade, and all your information and the status of your projects are all there. So what we want to do is have a little demo, and what I've got to demo is the assessment and looking at what it actually collects in terms of data and some of the dependency mapping that it can do for you within your environment.
Cool.
So here we are in the Azure portal, and we're in the Azure Migrate blade. And like I said, we have those key scenarios. So you can see down the left-hand side, servers, databases, VDI, etc. Now what we've done is we've looked at a bunch of our servers, and we've collected data on them. And we can see we've collected data such as the server name, IP addresses, memory, all the kind of key information that you would need to look at these workloads. And one of the cool features that we have in Azure Migrate is the ability to dependency mapping, to look at what these servers interconnect with, what ports they're communicating with, what other servers, what processes they're running, etc. And this is an overview of what that actually looks like. So we can see we've got 11 connections from those different IP addresses coming into this payroll server. And then we've got connections going out to a bunch of ports and services as well. We've also got the information, like I said, the high level information of that server. So it's server name, its operating system, its MAC address, all that kind of key information that actually does help you when you are doing that migration strategy as well. We can also see processes, and we can actually see what processes are talking to each of these different ports. So again, this helps when you're looking at your networking design, for example, in Azure. You can see which ports you need to open, what NSGs you need to think about, what your firewalls need to look like. And again, this is probably information that is already stored on-prem, but you might not have fully documented. Or it could even be that you have on-prem like an any rule, so everything just goes in and out because you don't want to manage that traffic. You can start to be a bit more granular because we're starting to collect that data now, and we can actually make our environment much more secure. So again, lots of information to take and digest and pull back into your design and how you move that into Azure as well. Now we've got all that information about the servers, what we want to look at is things like how much is it going to cost, and are there any issues that we actually need to take care of first of all. Now, what you'll see here is 2 assessment reports. And if you look at the sizing criteria column, one's based on performance and one's based on as on-prem sizes. So I always tell customers to run these 2 reports. What will happen is you will see that you've probably oversized things on-prem, because let's face it, we've all been guilty of oversizing our servers on-prem because A, we probably could, and B, we didn't want to get those help desk calls where people were saying things were running slow, right? But the last thing we want to do is migrate those oversized servers into Azure, because we'll be paying for those oversized servers much more within Azure. So if we look at the data that Azure Migrate has collected around our servers, so things like CPU utilization, memory utilization, we can start to size them more appropriately within the cloud and hopefully save our company more money. So that's why I always say to have those 2 reports, and then you can compare them and you can see the cost difference if you start to right size your workloads. So if we go into one of these reports, we can actually see some of the detail that's happening within them and collecting, and use that to make some decisions. So like I said, we've got cost on how much it would cost us to host this workload in Azure. And we've also got the Azure readiness. Now, this helps us flag up any conditions that we might have to address or anything that's not suitable for Azure. What you'll probably see in this kind of report, if you look at it within your environment, are things like ready with conditions around some of the Linux-based operating systems, or even some Windows servers. So if you have some old legacy Windows servers running in your environment, you know, an old server 2003, you'll probably see ready with conditions marked against that kind of server, because yes, in theory, we could host that in Azure, but it's not a supported operating system. And let's be honest, it's been out of support for quite a while, so you shouldn't even have that in your environment anymore. But that's what this report can flag up with you. It can flag up those things that you've maybe missed or hadn't thought about when you're doing your migration strategy as well. But that's just a brief overview of what Azure Migrate can do. There's lots more, but that's just giving you a little flavour of it. And I do have some more resources about how you can delve into that a bit more on screen as well, on that link as well. Have you guys got any questions?
We do, yeah. We've got loads of questions.
Yeah,
That's a great demo. That was really cool.
yeah. I didn't know it could do so much. It's moved on since I last used it back in 2017 by miles. So yeah, it's really cool. So quick question for me. Could I use it, say, if I was in AWS, could I use it to migrate my servers to Azure? Or?
So yes, you can. If you do have servers in AWS or one of the other cloud providers, you can use Azure Migrate to assess that and actually migrate it. Now, it's a tiny bit confusing in terms of what you actually use within Azure Migrate. So you have to assume that your AWS or your GCP server is actually a physical server and use that migration strategy. So use that tooling that assumes it's a physical server. And then that way we can just assess it and we can suck it out and move it into Azure. It's actually a really good question, Richard, because I've been working on a demo of how to do that. So I need to edit the footage and put all that together and bring it out. So hopefully you'll see more information on that soon.
Sarah,
Awesome.
is there a limit on how many servers you can migrate?
Yes and no. So we have 2 versions within Azure Migrate. We have an agent-based migration tool. So that means that you have to install an agent on all your servers so that we can kind of suck them out of the environment and put them in Azure. We also have the agentless one, which means that you don't have to install an agent on your server, and instead we utilize the VMware and vCenter technologies that you have in your environment. Now, if you go with the agentless one, as far as I understand, we have no limits. If we go agentless, there are some limits around all of that. Our documentation does tell you a bit more about that. But you could move as many servers as you wanted into Azure. Ultimately, it's just you need to have a think about what mechanism you use to migrate them.
Nice.
So I know you mentioned Server 2003, but with Server 2008, I think Azure gives you some sort of extended support. Is that possible to, can we use Azure Migrate to do that, or?
Yep, so Azure Migrate will flag Server 2008 servers as supported to run in Azure. We fully support that, and we can use those extended support because on-prem Server 2008 is kind of out of support unless you sign a special agreement with us to get more patches, etc. But if you put it in Azure, you're getting those 3 years. I think it's less than 3 years now, because that announcement was a while ago. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But you're getting those free patches. You're getting that more time. So if people are time constrained in terms of moving, so say, actually, there's a great example. I had a customer who were moving out of their data center. They had some Server 2008 servers, and the reason they were moving out of their data center was that the government were building a train track right through their data center. Not ideal. So they were time constrained because obviously there was construction happening. They had to be out by a certain date. So they lifted and shifted everything into Azure just as servers. So it was giving them the time to prepare a bit more. So that's a great use case for your Windows Server 2008 going up into Azure, because you get that extended support, your servers are secure, your workloads are secure for another 3 years, and it gives you that time to actually find the budget and figure out what you're actually going to do with those workloads, whether you're going to upgrade it to Server 2019 or actually look at PaaS or SaaS or even decommissioning the workload ultimately. So, yep.
Yeah, we've got some customers that I would like to run this just so they can find out what they've actually got, because as you said, they've probably got servers that they don't know about. So
Yep.
where can people go and find out a bit more about data migration and kind of Azure Migrate? Is there any good resources that you can kind of point us to?
Yep, so we have a migration center. If you type in Azure Migration Center into your favorite browser and search engine, it'll bring up a whole load of information. It'll give you information about Azure Migrate, the data center migration process, and it'll also even link to some of our partners, our Microsoft partners that actually specialize in data center migrations. That's their bread and butter. That's what they do. They can help you inject some of that knowledge and take hopefully some of the pain away from the migration by utilizing experience from other customers. So Azure Migration Center is where you should head to for some of that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Cool. So just thinking about this, like what Gregor said, he wants to use it for some of his customers to find out what they have. Is there like a cost involved with that? Or like, is it a free tool to help get machines up into Azure?
So ultimately, Azure Migrate is a free tool. Where we start to store some of that dependency data, we actually utilize Azure Log Analytics. So I think we give you 180 days worth of free kind of discovery. If you start to store the data longer than that, then there is a cost involved in Log Analytics. But if you've ever looked at the Log Analytics pricing, it can be very cheap if you configure it so that it's not consuming masses of gigs of data, because I think we charge per gig of data and also how long you retain that data. So as long as you're mindful of that, it can be quite cheap, even the cost of a coffee cup per month to run. But ultimately, Azure Migrate is a free tool that we give our customers.
That's awesome, to be honest. Another last question before we're going to move on to some fun questions in a second, but an update to Azure Migrate in June 2020, I think. What was in that update?
So what we actually got in that update was pretty cool. So we've launched a new service called Azure VMware Solution, which allows customers to leverage VMware within Azure. And within Azure Migrate, that June update, we actually built a report, so an assessment report, so you can assess your on-prem environment and then price it up, or look at the readiness of what it would look like if it actually was hosted in that Azure VMware solution. So it's really cool for our customers to be able to see that and show that migration path, and hopefully we'll get more tooling, obviously, as the teams work on that, because the Azure VMware solution is still in public preview at the moment. So that was the cool thing in the June update that we got.
Awesome.
So yeah, we've got a couple of fun questions now for you.
Okay.
So I follow you on Twitter quite a lot, and I noticed you've been talking a lot about farming. So if you weren't in IT, would you be a farmer?
Yes, I actually grew up on a farm, so the love of farming comes from generations. If you look back my family tree, both ways, it's farming all the way. So that's where that love comes from, and I think if there was more money in farming, I'd probably be doing that. And definitely, although I love tech, I would love to have kind of a small holding, like some chickens, some ducks, some sheep and stuff, and do all of that. So yeah, that would definitely be what I'd be doing if tech wasn't an option.
Oh, that's cool.
You could put some IoT devices in and control your farm through tech, through Azure.
That would be awesome. That would be really much fun. That would be
I've
fun.
made that one. The last question we've got for today. What do you enjoy most about organising and running the world's most awesome Azure user group?
I want to say the free stickers that we get at the user group. No, in all seriousness, I just love the fact that I get to meet so many cool people. Like I met you, Gregor, obviously through the user group, and that's enabled me to build off and build that network and just meet so many cool people, hear so many cool stories, and yeah, get cool stickers, because we always make sure we have cool stickers.
Yeah, definitely. The stickers are awesome. So I think we're pretty much done for the day now with time. So thanks very much for taking the time out to come and speak to Gregor and myself about data center migrations. I've learned a lot. I'm sure Gregor has as well. And I think we're going to go and have a little look at what we can do with it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks, Sarah.